Ben, come on up here, please, too. Everyone, this is Ben Boland, the Chief Blockchain Strategist from OST. OST stands for Open Simple Token.
Thanks.
So Ben and I are here from Berlin, and our company is about 60 persons globally right now. And we have about 20 of us in Berlin. We've got another 25, 30 in Pune, India. A team now of 6 persons here in New York and a couple in Hong Kong. Before we get into it, just want to say a big thank you to John and Ben, the team from Betaworks. Fantastic what you guys are doing here with the studio. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to come here and talk to everyone about blockchain, about what we're doing at OST. We're not going to make this a sales pitch about OST. We want to keep this kind of really broader about the industry, about blockchain, about what it's going to take to help bridge the gap between blockchain and mainstream. I'll briefly introduce Ben, my co-conspirator. Ben and I met in Berlin a couple years ago. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started many companies in New York, in California, in Seattle. Spent most of my time here in New York. A few years ago, I was working on a company in Berlin, and we had some ideas around blockchain tokenization early on in the life cycle of cryptocurrency. And Ben was working at a company called Monax, which is one of the pioneers in blockchain technology. And we just started batting ideas back and forth and started to brainstorm, how do we actually make some of these early innovations, how do we actually bring them to the mainstream? And that's basically the ideas that turned into Simple Token, OST, Open Simple Token, as we call it today. And so we're just going to dive into it and talk a little story about blockchain and how we get it into the mainstream today. So first question is, how many people in this audience own a, let's say, a Coinbase account? So pretty much everyone here. And how many actually own a crypto wallet where you own your own keys? It's a little less. How many have programmed in Solidity? A couple. How many have written a smart contract? A couple. Okay. How many have been to a cocktail party or dinner party recently where you've tried to explain to someone, maybe didn't quite get there, what cryptocurrency is and what a blockchain is? Pretty much everyone. All right. So the way I equate to where we're at right now with blockchain technology is very similar to 1993 Internet. This is what the Internet looked like in 1993. This is the Mosaic browser. Back in 1993, the technology that we were building on top of early protocols. It's actually quite ironic. One of our latest technologies working on OST we call Mosaic, but this was basically the early internet browser. And back then, there was a lot of confusion as to what is the internet, how does it work, will it be beneficial? And this is a video from 1993 I thought to play for everyone because it's really analogous to where we're at today with blockchain.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard be around big fight up in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is Internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network. Mm-hmm. The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what Internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does
it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not a. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger.
So that was the internet back in 1993, and so this is a chart showing Bitcoin's price over the last few years, and as you can see, this is a lot of uncertainty, some hype, more uncertainty. And you look at the parallel as to kind of where we're at in terms of the cycle on blockchain. Here's John Oliver trying to explain to the world what a blockchain is.
People believe that the really exciting thing about it is the potential of the innovative technology that it's built on, and that's something called blockchain. Now, normally, if I wanted to send money to someone across the world, a bank would need to verify that transaction, and it could take days. But with Bitcoin, it is vastly faster because no bank is involved. And that is because blockchain technology allows a record or a ledger of every Bitcoin transaction ever made to be stored not in one place, but across vast numbers of computers. That is part of what people mean when they say Bitcoin is decentralized. And decentralization has a lot of theoretical advantages, from speed to security.
The key point here is that this is a distributed ledger. There is no central server. All the other ledgers that we have, all banking ledgers, all company ledgers, they all sit and reside inside that company, which means they have one point of attack. They can be hacked. JP Morgan was hacked by cyber thieves not so long ago. Home Depot, Target, we've had all these companies get hacked precisely because there's one central repository of information. The Bitcoin ledger resides on thousands of computers. You can't hack that.
And when you think about it, that sounds great. And because of the complicated process the network uses to verify records, it is very secure. Now, relax. I'm not going to get into what that process is or how it works, but I will share a really helpful, really dumb metaphor for why it is safe.
The way I like to think of it is that a blockchain is a highly processed thing, sort of like a chicken McNugget. And if you wanted to hack it, it'd be like turning a chicken McNugget back into a chicken. Now, someday someone will be able to do that, but for now, it's going to be tough.
Hold on. That is an absolutely horrible thought. So why is that reporter so happy about the idea? Because if anyone ever figures out how to turn a chicken McNugget back into a chicken, that chicken is going to be fucked up. He's going to spend the rest of his life suffering from PTSD and writing haunting poetry about the experience. The things I saw, buck, buckaw. My body is whole, but what of my soul?
So you can see we're still trying to figure out how to explain what blockchain is. But if you look at, this is the chart of the NASDAQ, and you see the bubble, dot-com bubble in 1999, 2000. One of the questions everyone's going through right now, if you look back at the chart of kind of Bitcoin and where we're at with cryptocurrency, are we right now, are we past the bubble? Or are we still on our way up? And if you believe that we're, we're kind of in the crash right now, then you could say that maybe we're at the spot that's pointed out here in 2000. If you believe that, we're still on our way up, then you'd say we're somewhere, let's say, around 1997. My theory is that we're still somewhere around 1993, and that there's going to be a long kind of cycle of up and down, but that the general progression is going to be up over the long term. And if you look even the NASDAQ here, obviously there was the crash with the dot-com bubble, but then you had massive recovery, and we're at kind of where we're at today in terms of the the growth of technology stocks. And regardless of whether you believe where we're at in that cycle, the fact of the matter is we're still really early in terms of crypto adoption. And we say crypto adoption, we really think about it in terms of mainstream adoption of blockchain technology. This is perhaps the best indication of how close we are to blockchain being able to be adopted by consumers on a mass scale, is that if you look at number of crypto wallets compared to mass market consumer applications, let's say Twitter or Instagram, or compared to, let's say, the largest online payment app today is WeChat Payments in China, which is actually now about 1 billion users. And if you look at where we're at with crypto wallets, 25 million today, and so we still have a long way to go, and a lot more innovation to go in order to get there in terms of having a mass adoption of crypto and blockchain. Now, we might only be at 25 million wallets, but the growth has been steady. And if you look at this chart here, this is the quarter by quarter growth of crypto wallets, according to Statista over the last few years. And what's interesting to note is if you look at Q4 of last year was massive growth, because you also had a massive growth in terms of crypto prices. And so you had a lot of people kind of jump into the market as they saw market gains. And then you look at Q1 this year, you actually have a slowdown of the growth as there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market. And so you see people coming in because of speculative markets, and this is not all that dissimilar from the dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble, it takes a bubble sometimes to educate a market. You think about back, I don't know how many of you can remember it, but I remember back in 1998, 1999, my mom calling me up and say, should I be buying Microsoft stock? Should I be buying, IBM stock? Or then it became, these dot-com high flyers. And the question there, the stock market was educating consumers about the technology. And here we have the crypto market and people seeing gains is educating people about the underlying blockchain technology as well. Now, there is many differences between blockchain and the adoption cycle of blockchain versus the dot-com adoption cycle. This here shows the price of Ethereum. And to me, we talk about Ethereum as the programmable blockchain, right? So Ethereum is based on smart contract technology, which we'll talk more about here. But if you look at, it's been a very short period of time for the Ethereum takeoff. I mean, essentially, it was February, March of last year before Ethereum moved at all. And then suddenly, you had kind of the ICOs kind of develop, and you had people realize that you could start to build very interesting technologies and layer 2 protocols and applications on top of Ethereum. And in the last essentially 15, 16 months, you see this massive growth of Ethereum. And so you think about where we're at in this cycle. In the dot-com cycle back in 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, even after the dot-com crash, companies had to spend so much money just educating the world about the internet and even getting people connected to the internet. And I remember John and I were at AOL in year 2000, and we were making presentations to the AOL team about how the entire dial-up business is going to die because broadband's taking over, and they didn't, no one listened to us at the time, and but this is at the amount of money that companies needed to spend back then just to get people online and just to educate them about what the internet is vastly different today. I mean, today you have 7 billion people who are connected via mobile phones. You have 3 billion internet users in terms of desktop users, and you don't have to get people online. You have to figure out how do you get them to adopt this difficult, challenging technology that is blockchain that still needs to be demystified from a user experience and scalability standpoint. Regardless of where you think we're at in terms of blockchain and crypto, make no doubt about it that we're in the beginning of a massive cultural phenomenon. If you think about millions of people around the world questioning national currencies, willing to adopt global, cross-border, frictionless, decentralized currencies and technology, this is a big cultural phenomenon. I mean, this is kind of thing that a few years from now we'll be looking back on this and saying, remember when people first started sharing things on Facebook, and you said, are people really going to do this? Are people really going to be uploading their photos or putting their status of I am at Betaworks right now on Facebook? Or when people first started to tweet, people first started to share their stories on Snapchat, Instagram. That's kind of where we're at right now in terms of people just starting to say, we don't need to, rely and trust the national currency. We can just transfer money and transfer data between ourselves and build new types of applications and experiences that don't rely on the institutional middlemen. And I think it's 10 years from now we'll look back on this and say this is going to have massive impact on society overall in terms of breaking down kind of a lot of the power concentration of large national corporations and national governments as well. And so I think we're at the very beginning of understanding what this cultural phenomenon is all about. And it's also, a big technology phenomenon in terms of decentralization. And, the internet that we know of is basically, controlled by a very small number of companies today. Facebook, and Google account for 90% of the online advertising. Apple, and Samsung control the mobile phone market with a couple of upstarts, coming along. You have companies like Tencent and Facebook controlling messaging worldwide. And it's a very small number of companies who control the internet today, and this is the opportunity for things to basically be built from the grounds up and built around human and people empowerment. Now, will it happen? Will it take hold? We don't know yet. Right now, all of the blockchain technology is still building on AWS, so you still got to pay someone to use the servers. But we're at the beginning of something that both the cultural phenomenon and the technology phenomenon that could have huge implications for many years to come. And make no doubt about it, though, what it is fueling is an incredible wave of innovation. This is a slide actually from about 6 months ago even, which is showing some of the companies that have been involved in developing protocols, very early kind of infrastructure in the blockchain space. And, protocols are, this is not the sexy application layer. This is, how do you actually get kind of the infrastructure to work, to enable things to move smoothly, and to, say, transfer something from one point to another point, and have it actually work every time at a scalable kind of level. And we're now at a place where, anyone can write a smart contract. This actually is the Ethereum smart contract code for creating your own ERC20 token. So if you know how to write Solidity, you can use this code and write a token. It's not that easy though, but it's open. It's open source for anyone to do it. Today in 2018, anyone can then deploy that contract. And so publish it. So you have everything you need open source to write a smart contract, to deploy an ERC20 token, and then deploy it, kind of send it out into the world. And if you trust yourself enough to use my Ether wallet or other sources, you can transfer money to someone without any intermediaries. And how many folks here have used my Ether wallet? So a small handful. My Ether wallet is not a bank. Be careful with your private key. How many of you tried to explain to your mother what a private key is? Okay, 3 or 4. So that's a tough one. But what are we trying to do here, right? We were trying to figure out is how do we bridge this gap? How do we bridge this gap from 25 million crypto wallets today to the global internet users? And that's going to take a lot of innovation. Now, if we can get there, there's all sorts of benefits. And without getting into too much detail, we're going to tell the story of the benefits of tokenization through a company called Unsplash, which John mentioned in the introduction. How many folks here have heard of Unsplash? If you've ever seen a presentation that has big, pretty pictures like these, that's an Unsplash photo. Unsplash is integrated into Medium. It's integrated into Trello. It has 6 billion photo views per month on Unsplash. I mean, this is a massive service. And for companies like Unsplash, the benefits of tokenization are potential is tremendous of kind of adopting a blockchain token. So how do you create an economy within your application that has people who are earning tokens for contributing to the community? Let's say in Unsplash's case, it could be, for instance, uploading photos for photographers that are high valued or maybe in categories that are well searched or sought after. It could be rewarding based on whether those photos are downloaded. It could be micropayments. It could be transfers between individuals who, if I like your photo, and how do could we transfer a token from me to you, or from the system or from Unsplash to the photographer? And if it's a penny or 2 penny at a time, you could never do that with fiat. But you could do that with a blockchain token. And having these kind of incentives and reward structures, we have people who are earning tokens, people who are spending the tokens, people who are buying the tokens and then transferring the tokens, that enables you to have an economy within an app. And ultimately, what companies like Unsplash want is, how do you rely less on the big guys, Facebook and Google, for growth and engagement and re-engagement of your users, and instead invest in your users and invest in your product, have the product grow itself? A simple way to think about it is, let's say if it costs an app $10 to acquire a new customer, would you rather spend, say, $3 investing in incentivizing your users to do the behaviors that are going to grow engagement, and invest the other $7 into building a better product? I think most app developers would say yes, but it's been very hard to do until you think about things like a blockchain token, where you actually can develop a system where people can earn tokens, and when they earn it, it's theirs. It's theirs in the sense that they own it in their crypto wallet. They can convert it into other currencies. They can cash it out, as opposed to virtual point systems where there's always this concern or fear of the rules might be changed on the users at any moment in time. If you think about airline reward programs, we all get caught up in playing the game of the airline reward program. What you forget is that it's also a big black box program where the airline can change the rules at any moment in time. You don't really own the points that you earn, so you can't exchange it for other things. You can only use those points for whatever the airline says you can use it for, and they set the price. And so with blockchain, you have the ability to set up whole new types of rewards and incentive programs to monetize and transmit data through blockchain transfers with every token transfer in ways that you haven't been able to do before. And we'll go into some examples of this. So back to Unsplash. So I want to tell a little bit about Unsplash because it's just like such a great story and really a company that's just ripe for tokenization. And it also speaks to what you need to build in order to make tokenization and blockchain possible for companies at scale. So first, just give you some data on Unsplash. Unsplash is huge. I mean, it's like this company in that I think a lot of people have used Unsplash. They've all seen Unsplash's photos, but not many folks realize just how big it is. Unsplash has 6 million photo views per month. And just a couple of months ago, it was 5 billion. And so it's growing very quick. I'll show a chart on the next slide. It's something like 700 million API calls per month, 450 million photos downloaded every month. And a photo that's featured on Unsplash actually gets more views than a photo that's on the front page of the New York Times or the best photos on Instagram. Instagram photos are fleeting. It's like 24 hours, 48 hours that kind of gets likes, and then it kind of drops. Unsplash photos actually get more and more views and more usage over time. Some of the most incredible cohort data I've ever seen in any kind of application. And this is Unsplash's growth. All right, and so what they're really proving here, so Unsplash is 10 photo downloads per second versus I think it's Shutterstock here, which is 5 photo downloads per second and has a market cap of $1.2 billion. And Unsplash did this by basically setting photos free. What does that mean? All right, so what they did is they said, photographers, upload your best photos. We'll let you do 10 photos at a time, and we'll highly curate and make sure it's only your best photos. And then they built algorithms and systems for basically to tell what are the photos that people are searching for the most and actually using the most and downloading and kind of and getting value from. And so as opposed to the kind of traditional stock photography market, which would charge you $500, $1,000 to buy a photo, Unsplash made all the photos free, and photographers love it. Photographers love it because for a couple of reasons. One is because every time someone views a photo on Unsplash, it builds the photographer's reputation. It builds their ability to get downstream revenue and to build kind of a client base and a fan base. And this is hugely important because we've gone from a place where it used to be a very small number of people who were professional photographers to now having massive creative class. I mean, so many Unsplash photos are taken with iPhones and then used by hundreds of millions of people around the world. And so what Unsplash wants to do is they've already begun decentralized photography, and now they want to build an economy around this. An economy around this is not just saying, let's just charge for photo downloads again, but let's build an economy where we reward people for taking actions that benefit the community. So uploading photos that are downloaded very often, so that's an indication that actually people are searching for them and finding value from them. For rewarding people for helping their machine learning actually learn better and better what the photo is all about. And so the tagging of the photo, the crediting of the photo, the attribution, for API partners, for distributing the photos around the web, and for enabling people like this guy, Jeff Sheldon, to have 140 million views of his photos on Unsplash. And so Jeff Sheldon, he has basically turned from an amateur photographer to earning a living from Unsplash without Unsplash really enabling any monetization yet. So they're looking at how do they use a blockchain token to actually turn this amazing growth story into a functioning economy. Now, so what do they want to do with blockchain? So one is they want to create a fair, open, rewarding economy. Right? And say fair and open, they want to be that it is not about Unsplash setting the rules. It's about the users themselves providing the best photos and setting the terms and participating under in an economy where everyone feels like they have a fair shake and they keep the money that they're earning. It has to be global, so the photographers and the users exist all around the globe. They have national currencies. They use all sorts of different currencies, and what a blockchain token will allow them to do is to be able to transfer between themselves without worrying about cross-border fees and currency fluctuation. And it has to be trusted. It has to be done in a way where Unsplash couldn't just launch a point system. The community wouldn't trust that what happens if Unsplash devalues the points, or if Unsplash changes how much it costs to spend, how many points it costs to buy something. As I said, they want to incentivize high-value actions. They also want to reward micro-actions. So the little things, if you do one little step one little action that helps the community to being able to do a token transfer from one person to another. And ultimately what they want to do is they want to create a full loop economy within Unsplash. And what we mean by that in terms of a full loop economy is that you have some people who are earning tokens. You have other people who maybe they aren't contributors, so they don't earn tokens, so they maybe take money out of their wallet to buy tokens. Almost think about equivalent to, say, like online games, where you have people who are really good at playing the game, and so they earn the next level, and other people, they want to skip the line, so they buy to level up. And then you have people, lots of places, sinks, like it's called in the online game industry, where people can spend the tokens. And so you can imagine a photographer in Unsplash is earning tokens as people value their photos. They're then spending the tokens on better, maybe it's editing tools, on better ways to get featured. They may be earning more tokens when people are contacting them through a bidding system to hire them for work. Maybe they're responding to a market rate for photos that are kind of in high demand. So for instance, you go to Unsplash today, they've got like the kinfolk category kind of nailed. So you can find a hipster coffee shop, no problem. But try finding a photo of a doctor's office, not as easy. And so creating a market rate for kind of photos that are in high in demand. So all this stuff can be done with a blockchain token, and this is all part of creating this kind of full loop buy, earn, and sell kind of economy. Now, this is kind of like a geeky chart, kind of representing this, but the theory here is that you have some actors who would be buying tokens, you have other actors to be earning tokens. Maybe it really depends on one economy versus the next, but typically in this example, your power users are earning the token, so they're the ones who perhaps are the ones who are contributing to the community the most. So it's like your top 1% or 5% of users who are adding the content. You can say an example of let's say if it's a service like the next version of Yelp or something. You have 1% of users who are writing the reviews and everyone else is benefiting from them, and so those might be the people who are earning the token. If people are finding the content contributions valuable, other people might be buying the token in order to pay for services, and you want everyone spending the token and as much as possible within the network, and then some people actually selling the token, which means kind of transferring out. Still got to pay your rent in US dollar as of today. So Unsplash wants a blockchain token, but it's actually really, really hard for them to do this themselves. So if you remember a couple slides back, the Solidity code I showed in terms of, if they wanted to write their own token, they could, but Unsplash is remarkably a team of 15 people. That has these 6 billion photo views, 15 people. They don't have a blockchain developer on their team. They're not about to randomize their business by kind of turning the entire company into a blockchain business overnight. They're focused on building the best Unsplash right now. But they want the same thing that every other consumer internet company wants, right? So every consumer internet company, wants to be able to, increase engagement, increase growth, increase monetization, without relying on the big guys, without relying on Facebook and Google to help them get there. And so this aha is, well, a blockchain token could be kind of a ticket to getting there, but this stuff's really, really hard and very expensive and has all sorts of risk. And so I think we've all heard some kind of the ICO perils, and really ICO projects or good ICO projects are really at the protocol level. They're kind of building infrastructure. That's really what the regulations increasingly are supporting, is that ICOs are for companies that are providing, there has to be a reason for the token, a utility behind the token. A company like Unsplash, they could, they don't need their own token. They could build on someone else's token. It would be hard for them to pass kind of the SEC regulatory kind of hurdle for launching their own kind of crypto token. And they also would face all sorts of challenges in terms of the readiness for the technology, the ability for their team to manage a blockchain implementation. And so I wrote on the right side of this slide here just some of the things that they'd have to think through. So one is scalability. The blockchain technology holds tons of promise in terms of token transfers and data transfers and money transfers between individuals all around the world. But the blockchain networks today have not figured out scalability at consumer grade. So for instance, Ethereum can handle about 850,000 transactions per day. And there's a lot of efforts underway to scale Ethereum, and we're going to talk about how we're working on scaling Ethereum by moving transactions off of public Ethereum but still on public blockchains. So scalability is a big issue that, let's say, Unsplash would have to address, and they'd have to build their own scalability solution if they did this themselves. Another is an issue called key management. So I asked before, who owns a private key and who has, talked to their mom about a private key, right? So imagine Unsplash trying to educate all of its tens of millions of users about private keys and having to work on building its own key management solution. And then imagine, so the whole notion with crypto is that when you own your key, it's your key and no one else knows it. So Unsplash, what happens when someone emails Unsplash customer support and says, I lost my crypto key and I lost all my Unsplash tokens. And so Unsplash would have to come up with an answer for how do they do key management, which are these very complex things to consider. Token rules, and so this is basically how do you program smart contracts to meet the business rules of Unsplash. So we're getting very specific to make sure that the smart contract meets the business requirements. And then, even if you got all that far, Unsplash would still have to figure out how to integrate a KYC, know your customer, AML, anti-money laundering, and every single Unsplash in the world would have to figure out their own crypto to fiat kind of exchange process. So this is a lot, right? So what I mean by this is imagine if every Unsplash and every other, every company like it had to, not just implement all this stuff, but also figure out the regulations behind how they can enable you to take your Unsplash tokens and convert it to US dollar when you want to go pay your rent. And so these are hard stuff to figure out. And then also, none of this comes with, management dashboards if you build it yourself. And, we're also used to kind of a really robust business and consumer user experiences. And so that's essentially the aha that we had behind when we started Simple Token, OST, Open Simple Token, was, this is what companies rely on software for and services. That, if you want to, use CRM in your company, you don't build it yourself. You rely on Salesforce. If you want to use, messaging, Uber and Airbnb, they could have built their own messaging, but they didn't. They use Twilio to send messaging to their users. If you wanted to use, video conferencing, you don't build your own video conferencing. You could. There's protocols out there, but you don't. You use something like Zoom or Skype or something. Most of the internet today, at least the kind of startups, all use Stripe when it comes to payments. No one builds their own payment processor. I remember, 7 years ago when I started an e-commerce company, 8 years ago, it took us a couple months to integrate Braintree. Today it's like 30 minutes to integrate Stripe. No one builds this stuff from scratch anymore or even does it the hard way. And then, everyone relies on AWS for everything, right? And, or the equivalent, right? And so this was kind of our aha behind, creating, OST Simple Token was, we started working with the Unsplashes of the world and said, well, what do we need to build in order to help bridge this gap between, blockchain and mainstream? And so I'm going to turn over to Ben to talk through some of the technology that we've been working on. But the problems that we set out to solve for companies like Unsplash, there's a lot of them. But I want to point out 5 that we really said these are core to kind of guiding our roadmap and what we're building at Simple Token. The first is scalability. As I said, public Ethereum doesn't scale. If you're going to have an application like Unsplash with 5 billion, 6 billion photo views per month and turn all those events and have them all be token transfers on a blockchain, you've got to build scalable solutions. And Unsplash isn't even the largest company that we're talking to. It's just the one that we're using here. And so this is how do you create blockchain scalability at internet grade. And then the second is usability. You saw the usability of blockchain today is still early days. It reminds me of that, the 20-year later version of the Mosaic browser. But the expectations of both consumer users and of business users is very high when it comes to user experience. And so that's something that we set out to kind of to work on as well. Integration, so everyone expects a RESTful API for everything these days, and that's something that we set out to provide. Is that you should be able to integrate blockchain technology very easily within your app, to do so in a plug-and-play kind of manner in a matter of seconds, kind of like implementing Stripe, and also not just integrating technology, but also integrating into the world around us, into regulations and the environment and society that we live in. Trust. So, this is a very big, kind of issues that people need to trust that when they earn an Unsplash token, that no one can ever take it away from them, that it has value, and that they can transfer it and trade it for something else. which speaks to the last point is also we had to solve for things like liquidity. So when you earn that Unsplash token, you still pay your rent in US dollar, and you got to make sure that there's a way to actually somehow exchange out of that token to something that you can actually pay your rent with. And so these are 5 big things that we kind of, challenges that we took on as we built the OST technology stack. We're very, very early in in building this. But frankly, so is every company in blockchain. And anyone who tells you otherwise is just, shilling and telling you a story. I mean, this stuff is going to take many, many years to perfect. And we're just, we stand on the shoulders of everyone who came before us and everyone who's working with us in the industry, all trying to build this technology together. And we have a very big technology stack that we're building. But I must emphasize, and I'm sure Ben will as well, you don't go this alone. There's a reason why the blockchain space is full of open source technology. It's a reason why we open source everything at the protocol level that we're working on, is because it's going to take many, many teams around the world to perfect this stuff and to build together. And it's going to take time. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they're just telling you a story. So this is what we do at OST. You can go to our website. I'm not going to give you a big sales pitch. Just what I really wanted Ben to walk you through our technology stack and some of the considerations that have gone into it.
To connect with what Jason just said, right? Like, we're not building this alone. And we have taken up quite a large mission here. But where this really came from, then personally from my side, was I'd been building these types of technologies, decentralized technologies, since 2014. And really what brought the message home with Jason was that if we don't get user adoption of these technologies, they still don't matter. You can build the nicest geeky things, but if no one uses it, it's just still sitting there in GitHub. So that's really where sort of we took the focus and started asking, okay, if we have these first systems that we call Web3 technologies, what are the missing technology pieces that we need to build for them to be connected or injected to the existing digital platforms that we have, where the millions of users are, and for those users to start seamlessly adopting those Web3 technologies, right? So really the setup of the stack really started from that main driver of building a smooth zero threshold curve for getting millions of people who have no idea what a private key is and what cryptocurrencies are, getting them interacting with it, and then as they learn, grow into this new technology and grow it from there. But then if I take a moment to sort of geek out, the way that we sort of built this stack is really around the OpenST protocol in the middle, right? And as sort of as a primer for that, we chose the Ethereum community for its developer community. There is no blockchain project out there that currently matches the richness of people actively contributing back to the Ethereum community. And so while this is a very big stack, we also try to make sure that the components we're building are modular and reusable and serve one logical function. And on that point, for the people, I don't know, first of all, who knows what Ethereum is? I guess most people, right? We went over those questions. Who knows what sharding is or heard about it? So there are a lot of work goes into how do you scale Ethereum, and the most dominant approach to that is let's try to follow the database approach, where the resources can be sort of better managed rather than everyone doing everything. Let's try to distribute who does what, right? Like at the highest level. Trick question, who read the original OpenST white paper that we put out? Probably no one. There you go, a few people. Our own folk don't count.
Why don't you explain real quick what OpenST
Yeah,
is?
sorry. I was going to go fast over this. So really the core of what everything revolves around is OpenST, right? It solves for the sharding problem of Ethereum, the scaling problem of Ethereum, by combining it also with the business problem. So what we do at the protocol layer of OpenST is we shard per token. We say like these tokens, these OST tokens are now going to be represented as this new token, and so we can group them on Ethereum mainnet and then have the high volume transactions on auxiliary systems. But now we sort of split the system into parts, and we want to make sure that it is a decentralized system. And so that's why on the lower part of the stack there's OpenST Mosaic, which ironically is also the browser name of the olden days. But the reason that we call it Mosaic is that we now have sort of cut these pieces into the system into different pieces, and we want to make sure that in a decentralized manner they are glued back together, right? So Mosaic is about composing these auxiliary systems that run the token transactions in high scale are actually secured by Ethereum mainnet. And so in that way, Ethereum mainnet is the one who is securing the whole periphery of auxiliary systems that run the open blockchains that we call utility chains. And so with OpenST, we sort of created this concept of a value chain that is Ethereum, and then new representations of that value are always fully backed, but are created on the utility chains where you can use them more cheaply, more fast, faster confirmation times. Which we then sort of call stake and mint from a business perspective, right? But that still doesn't solve for the problem where your grandma needs to know what our private key is. But because we have this more performant periphery system, we can actually use smart contracts there. So the tokens, when they are minted, they're actually not minted into your private keys address. They are minted into a smart contract that has the combined rules of you being able to always redeem the value of them, but they now have specific behavior rules that the company gets to set once. But importantly, these rules are enforced by the chain, right? So these rules are also then in the middle part, the token rules engine. This is really where it all comes together, because if our aim is to enable users to take back value, the rules of the game have to be clear and they have to be enforced by the chain. And so really where sort of the business logic comes in, and where it really becomes an interesting discussion of how do you design token economies, that sort of fits into that token rules engine that we put there on in the center. But then, as Jason said, if you're a 15-person team, you don't want to be dealing with the probabilistic eventual consistency of the blockchain and whether or not the blocks are being mined and all those things. So you need to wrap these complicated protocols back into simple actions that you can call over a normal API as you would with any other software system that you're integrating. And so there we have sort of split it into two. One, you can run it yourself, or we also provide sort of OST Kit, the SaaS version of it, where it's effectively the hosted version of the platform protocol code. And it's important here, sort of like, I think it sometimes is hard to convey this message, but we designed the smart contracts to also bind ourselves, right? So in some ways with the hosted platform, we're providing this middleman service, but we explicitly sort of write all the smart contracts so that we do not get to set the rules. Also for us, as much as for all the companies, really the ownership and the rules all sit with the end users, because otherwise we'd be defeating the original purpose of integrating these Web3 technologies into the platforms.
So here you see dev.ost.com, which is what developers are using today to already start integrating early versions of OST and to play with the OpenST protocol. And so as Ben was saying, what OpenST and the technology we're building on top of it allows a company like Unsplash to mint their own tokens without having to go through an ICO. The OST token is actually the token that's traded on public exchanges, and basically it's a white label version of the OST token that's represented on these side chains, these utility chains. And these utility chains are able to support high volume of transactions, which you couldn't do on public Ethereum, but the transactions are actually backed and supported by and actually finalized on public Ethereum so that everyone knows that they're actually true. And that people make sure they always can get their money. So we can go into this in detail with anyone who's interested in going into the technology with us. But I'd encourage anyone who's a developer here to check out dev.ost.com. You can play with the APIs. And then on top of that, we have a SaaS layer, kind of all your blockchain management tools. And where we're at right now in terms of the overall process here is we just recently finished Alpha Phase 2, and the way we've been building the whole kind of stack and the whole system together is basically the philosophy is build with the community. And so whether it's our partners like Unsplash, kind of larger companies to small development teams, we've been inviting developers to come in at every stage and start building, and then we get their feedback, we have them build POCs, and then we do, add more features, then do it again and again and again, and we'll be doing that all the way, throughout the rest of this year. We're targeting beta for this fall, and it'll be on mainnet this fall as well. And wanted to show everyone just, kind of, rather than hearing from us what it's all about, just a very short video to wrap up. With a company that actually won our POC challenge last week, a company called Kwanda. It was a German company that they used the APIs to build their own token integration using OST. And so just wrap up here by putting in their words, you can hear kind of what it was all about for them.
Welcome to our proof of concept of OST Kit Alpha Phase 2. My name is Mark and I'm the front engineer of this project. Today we would like to introduce you to Kwanda, a Q&A platform where you can ask and answer questions and reward users with our token system powered by OST. First we will show you a short explanation of Kwanda, and after that Anton will demonstrate a live demo and how we integrated OST in our project. Enjoy!
This is John. John has an important question. He is asking the community on a free Q&A platform for help. This takes time, and in addition, he is unsatisfied with the results. Then he tries Kwanda. On Kwanda, John offers a reward for his question in the form of a cryptocurrency token. Since he has set this reward, he is getting higher quality answers. So, after a short time, John chooses the answer he likes most and rewards the user. With Kwanda, a good answer is valuable.
My name is Anton, and together with Mark we made Kwanda. We are the complete team located in Germany and Austria. We have 3 different token actions in our app for our token called KWA. First, a user can create a question. We already integrated the latest API so the user can specify the reward for the best answer. When he is posting the question, the tokens get transferred to our company account. After that, when the user selects the best answer, the selected amount of tokens will get credited to the owner of the best answer. We also have a system for tipping, where any user can donate 1 KWA for an answer he or she likes. This transaction takes place between both users. Let's dive into our project. This is our front page. Here you can register a new account. Let's call him Steve. The account gets registered with the OST Kit API, and now the user has a wallet address. At the moment he has 0 KWA. In the demo we have an airdrop function where a user can claim some free tokens. Now when I click the button, the wallet gets updated and you can find the transaction in his wallet. In the background the server will check if the transaction is completed, and when I refresh the page you can see there is also a link to the transaction in OST view. This is our live log of token transactions, which are also accessible for every user. We also have a general live log for the backend server relevant for the token transactions in our app. Now let's post a new question. I will enter some text, and here I can set the reward. Let's say 15 KWA. 1 click later you can see the question is live on Kwanda, and now let's check the wallet. Great, the transaction is already completed and we can access the transaction in OST view. Don't be confused, the token symbol in OST view is QRO. Because we changed the name of our token. So now let's register 1 more user. This is Jack. And he has a great answer. Let's post his answer. Again logged in as Steve, we see that we have received a new answer. Fine. That's a great answer. Let's reward him with the 15 Qua. Now the tokens get transferred from our company account to Jack's wallet. Let's get back to Jack. As you can see, he now has the 15 Qua in his wallet and the transaction is already completed. You can also comment answers with helpful replies and earn experience points on your profile page. Quanda is now in a beta status and could be ready to ship tomorrow because we
So one thing I do want to say about this, like this was a video for the submission. So we ran a public hackathon, the second one, where we sort of said very basic baselines, right? The requirement was be selected, so have a team that is somewhat capable and do an actual integration with the software. And we had 250 original applications. Then we selected 142 by going over their proposal. And then they had 5 weeks. And then 68 actually build a live integration, which like is definitely more applications than built on Bitcoin. Ethereum probably still beats us, but that's like 5 weeks. And so it's simple token for users, but it's also a simple token for developers, right? Like it is important that we can't expect every developer to become a blockchain developer either, even if it is very simple to deploy your smart contracts, because these developers need to focus on their own user base. They need to build their own app. They need to build their own engagement.
So why don't we welcome up Preeti and Mark. We're going to do a short panel and answer some questions. But the point here while they're coming up here is that we're working with all these developers to learn and refine the technology so that we then can go from small teams like Quanda to larger startups, to the Unsplashes of the world, to companies that are even much larger than Unsplash. And our philosophy is basically just build with the community and learn it. What you saw is it might seem like it's kind of primitive, but it's compared to where the technology was just 3 or 4 months ago. You couldn't do this. You couldn't do token transfers like this integrated into an app without having to build everything yourself. And so it is a significant advancement from where things were just a couple months ago. Welcome, Mark. And welcome, Preeti. Do you want to take charge here?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys for that. That was great. I'm from Quartz. I'm a reporter there. If you haven't heard of Quartz, we're a website for the global economy, and I think that means, though, in sort of the post-2008 world, that we cover like Bitcoin and blockchain and a lot of technology in addition to kind of traditional financial topics. In fact, I'd say we kind of cover large-scale econ in a way that feels very different than just thinking about traditional finance. So if you haven't heard of us, check us out, qz.com. Highly recommend it, but I'm a little biased. So yeah, that's what I do.
I recommend it too.
Oh, there you go. Secondary opinion. Do you want to introduce yourself, since we kind of heard from
why don't we have Mark?
Mark, I'd love to hear.
Who's this guy? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you here? And
Mark Bonchek, founder of Shift Thinking. So we have a company that works with leaders and organizations to update their thinking for a digital age. The premise is that we're in transformative times, and it's not enough to do new things. We have to think in new ways. I write very frequently for Harvard Business Review. I wrote a column a few years ago on the coming age of branded currency, which kind of predicted a lot of this without thinking about blockchain, and then found out about OST, simple token at the time, and said, that solves all the problems of branded currency. And so connected up and have been really thrilled to be able to work a little bit with OST and thinking about how do we enable people to understand what blockchain means and what token economies mean and integrate it into the ways that they normally do their work.
Awesome. Before we start in earnest, I have to ask, what is a Chief Epiphany Officer?
So I'm in the epiphany business. So my
What does that mean?
That means it's, those aha moments where you're like, oh, I get it. And you kind of can't go back to where you didn't have that. That's my job, is to produce those. So
didn't realize you could get paid for that. That's good to know. Yeah. I'm probably in the wrong profession. All right. Okay, awesome. So thank you guys again for doing that. That was great. I find the internet sort of .com bubble and then the blockchain analogy really, really useful, in particular because we're about a decade out from when blockchain was ostensibly invented. And something I've been thinking a lot about is, we have a good sense of what the like theoretical use case for blockchain is, right? Like what it can accomplish, and it does one thing extremely well, and I think you guys did a good job of laying that out. What I don't understand is, where is the money? Like, we know what the value of crypto is, we know like what it means to hold that as an asset, but if I'm a company, you know, using blockchain on my platform, where's the money? And you know, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, sure, we faced an internet bubble, but we knew where the money was when it came to the internet. Like a lot of those companies did really well, a lot of them did badly too. So that's, you know, I would love to start there. Like, what's the kind of business case for this in terms of pure profit?
Mark, you want to start?
I'm not sure it was clear where the money was in the early days. I mean, where's John? So, you know, John and I very early on, like, it was not clear where the money was going to be. You know, the web was kind of free in effect, and you weren't going to make money off your browser. You weren't going to make, it was all the applications where it was going to be made. But I just think we're still in the early days of it's not clear how value is going to be created. This is a new tool, and I think we're only scratching the surface of what that's going to look like. So I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at it as that if you're creating a more engaged user base who are transacting with each other, that there's opportunities for companies to, especially if you're removing middlemen from that equation, to, if you know, at certain transactions to take a small piece of. We're already seeing, and so if you create more types of transactions, then you can decide, well, some of them can be frictionless, where it's just user to user with no kind of commission or transaction fee to the company. Others could be new types of transactions where you do take a commission for as part of providing a service. So the Unsplash example, and I'm totally making this up, is that you might have that if a user, let's say, downloads another user's photo, that maybe it does a small token transfer from one person to the next with no commission to Unsplash. But if a user hires a photographer through the Unsplash platform, that's similar to, say, renting an Airbnb, that they might take a commission on kind of that, hiring them to because they found them almost a lead gen through the platform. But those are transactions that would be very hard for Unsplash to do and to have a full economy with today with credit cards. And so creating this token economy incentive system where people are earning the token and spending the token and other people buying the token is something you can enable with blockchain, and then have the trust that that the transactions between the users are, many of them are just, user to user is a big part of it. And so I think there's lots of opportunities that will present themselves that we're still at the beginning of, but a large part is just, giving companies the ability to create those economies within their applications that hasn't existed before.
Something I'm wondering is if you don't, and I want to come back to something you said too, because I think it's really interesting, but if you don't know where the money is, kind of like you say we didn't really know in the late 90s, like how do you convince companies like Unsplash has obviously signed on to some degree, but other companies that aren't maybe super technical to sign on a technology where we're not sure where the money is?
Well, I think it's giving them a sense that there is money to be had. So some of it is I think that analogies are useful, at least when you're trying to grasp something that you're not familiar with. So take Uber. It was not clear early on that people are going to be making money by kind of, driving their cars around or sharing out their cars and so on. So it's a little bit the same thing now, right? If you take Facebook, so there's a lot of money now on advertising. That was kind of the dominant way of making money. But what you'll be able to do with token economies is you'll be able to actually monetize and incentivize people for all the content they're creating. So all of that kind of volunteer activity can start to be monetized and rewarded. Now, that's a big bucket. Exactly how that's going to happen, don't know yet. But if you look at for brands and companies, that's at least a pool of value to start to say, where am I relying on volunteer activity that people are not being rewarded, the Unsplash example. What is it that I can do as a brand or a company to be a platform or an enabler or to create a kind of orbit around my brand where I'm going to be able to pull in and create loyalty, not because of the product loyalty, but because of the relational loyalty?
Something you said, Jason, is sort of interesting to me because I understand the use case for this technology in Unsplash, or at least the way you explained it. But something you kept saying was like, this could be a good use case for rewards programs. There's tons of companies out there that have rewards programs. One that kind of comes to mind is Ulta, the kind of like famed, makeup and beauty brand. What I'm wondering is, you put 5 things up there on the board, right? 5 things that we need blockchain to sort of accomplish. We need these token economies to accomplish. 4 of those things already accomplished by the financial system, right? Only one really, from my perspective, this like trust and transparency issue isn't. So like, how do you convince a company you know, like a slightly bigger company, that it's worth, you know, investing in blockchain technology now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a process, and I think it's a process where customer-centric businesses will stick their neck out first. And well, first startups will go first, and startups will say, okay, we're going to disrupt the incumbents by providing, you know, better customer experiences, and so we're going to take out kind of the middlemen. We're going to give more control and power to the users, and some startups will, you know, make progress versus the incumbents by doing that. And then you'll have some of the incumbents who are the upstarts who will kind of lean in, and you know, they'll go first amongst the big guys. I think it's almost like, you know, Southwest Airlines, as an example, you know, kind of moved first amongst all airlines to provide a kind of a better, consistent kind of customer experience, you know, years back, and then once a couple come in and users find better customer service, you know, the dominoes all start to fall, and everyone has to kind of catch up to it. You know, there are lots of different loyalty programs today, but those loyalty programs are still black box programs, where they're, you know, proprietary systems that you have to have massive scale in order for them to work, which is why, you know, most, you know, kind of small companies don't have loyalty programs. And you don't have the blockchain principle of you earn it, you own it. It's actually, in most loyalty programs, you earn it and it can always be taken away from you, and they can always change the rules as to how much, how you can spend it and when you can spend it, and you can't transfer it to someone else. It is, you know, you're participating in their system. You know, we're here at Betaworks Studio today, and Betaworks Studio could very easily create a blockchain token kind of, program. They don't need to have massive scale. They can just provide a, kind of a loyalty program for its users to, every time you provide value to the community, you earn tokens. When you give back, there may be ways to spend tokens. And if you haven't earned any, you could buy tokens to, to come to a program. And it's all right here. It's just about how do you kind of create the tools to make enable companies to start to adopt it and try it. One last thing I'll turn to Ben is like this company Kvanda, there's already Quora today. Who knows if these guys will be successful? But someone will figure out some things like this and they'll break through, and those little examples will become bigger examples, and then things will develop over time.
I mean, I don't have the business sense in this audience or in this panel, but there is already a token economy that exists, right? We shouldn't forget that. We talk a lot about how to build token economies, especially from sort of a user data platform, but look at Bitcoin. Like, it is the first token economy. And then it's very important to note that it came together out of one simple rule, right? Like the code said, I will give you 50 Bitcoins originally for a block. That was the one incentive, very simple, that is repeated over and over again every 10 minutes. Now it's halved twice. But it built an entire industry, right? Like, people are running huge mining farms out of nowhere. They started producing specific hardware to outcompete this, and it all stems from one simple rule that everyone has to live by, that if you fulfill this action, you will get 50 Bitcoins. It took years for that belief point really to tip over, but it is the biggest functioning token economy that we have. So the question that we now have is how do we take that superpower, right? That superpower to set open rules that people know that if they contribute back in this way, they get that reward. How do we turn that into building more useful things than energy gobbling networks like Bitcoin, right?
So it's funny you said Alta. So
oh no, is Alta adopting blockchain?
I was at Alta last week with some other marketers talking about token economies and their loyalty program. They have 30 million members. And what was interesting was kind of where they saw this as distinctive. And I'd say the key insight and what we're talking about is, we have this real separation between what the anthropologists would call market economies and relationship economies. So when friends help you move, it's pizza and beer. You don't pay the money, right? You can give them some money for gas, but it's not a payment. And right now, in the way that brands relate to customers, it's one or the other. So if someone posts something, great fingernails on Pinterest for Ulta, you're not going to give them money for that. That's kind of not cool. It's the community. But with a token economy, you can give them points. and then it's okay. And those points might be convertible into purchases. So it enables them to have a much richer relationship with the customer. And that's what they got really excited about. And to Jason's point, the customers can kind of be rewarding each other. So it's not just the brand to the customer to each other. So the big insight was, this isn't a program that's just between us and our customer. It's an economy in which all of the constituencies are able to exchange with each other, and we're just kind of the enabler of that.
Yeah. And we look at it like our role here is, provide tools and let 1,000 flowers blossom, right? And so like we're just planting as many seeds as possible and letting startups and businesses that have they have innovators, entrepreneurs inside their companies who have all sorts of ideas about how they could maybe leverage a blockchain token. We just want to see as many of them try it as possible, because some of them will hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm still chewing on is that it seems like the real value out of blockchain, among many things, is that it really depends on this kind of value and climate of distrust that, to some degree, like I think about when I make a purchase, I am pretty, in the moment, I'm okay, like trusting that wherever I make a purchase or whatever like online system I'm using or whatever rewards program exists, that they're going to kind of do their due diligence. I assume that there's enough of like a financial, social, and business tax that if Ulta stopped, rewarding customers in the way that they said they would, they wouldn't do as well, or they'd go out of business. So do you see that as kind of pessimistic? Like, is it like where did this like what I'm hearing is like this sort of grand climate of distrust come from?
Well, I think it's less of a climate of distrust, and it's more of a move towards empowerment and fairness. And also, I think it's as a Thomas Friedman 20 years ago said, the world is flat, right? But it's like a real kind of realization of that you have people who are transacting, not just within their home country, but with people all around the world, and they're micro interactions and micro transactions. And there's things today where they're not even thought of as transactions, but where some value could be transferred from one person to the other by that interaction. And you can never do that with fiat, money, and especially across border. A $25 credit card processing fee for a 1 cent or 1/10 of a cent transaction, you just can't do. And then kind of across border kind of currency, kind of exchanges. And you can do that with a blockchain, and you can do so with the trust that you just spoke of.
I would say that some of it is distrust, but a lot of it is more that there are degrees of trust, and it's more about what happens if you put trust into the system. There might not be distrust, but if you added trust, something else could happen. The other is, I think a lot of this is about appreciation and gratitude, and that what these currencies enable us to do is, money isn't a great currency for appreciation and gratitude, but you look in the Unsplash cases, right now, those currencies are like likes. That's the currency of appreciation on the internet. It doesn't really mean much, but if you could start to put some actual meaningful value on it without it turning into a tip where it kind of devalues the relationship because it's a payment, then a whole kind of new economy is expressed. And some of that is trust, but it's more about like trust and gratitude.
Actually, we've been talking about Unsplash a lot, but like it's just such a great use case, and they are being progressive and leaning into blockchain in a big way, and they're very excited to work with us. But like, you come from a world where, let's say there was 1,000, very highly skilled professional photographers who would take photos for Getty Images and the like, and Corbis, and they could, there's just a small set of people with this expertise who would charge to access their photography. This was all based around kind of the print business model. And now you have, kind of the digital model where, anyone can be a photographer, and everyone's carrying around, cameras in their pockets that are, richer than we used to, the most professional photographers used to have. And now you have, hundreds of, thousands or millions of people who can actually, contribute to photography, and 100, and many times more who can benefit from it, and you rethink the economic model of it, and you think that it's not about, buying the photo because the photo is free, right? You're going to get it anyways. It's about the appreciation to the artist and to the person who took it and helping them build their reputation. And you can think about a different economic system around these little micro interactions that add up over time, rather than just thinking about, I'm going to buy this photo for $1,000.
I would just want to jump in. I was thinking of different answers, but I think what I would answer to that question is that we've already done the migration, right? Like, we interact with people everywhere on countless different digital platforms, but the value, the monetary systems are still in a different decade. And so, no, it's not necessarily based on distrust. I would say it's about, indeed, this movement of people here, especially in cities like New York or Berlin. Like, people don't, I mean, you visit continents as often, or whatever. But more importantly, like, these digital platforms are already global, but the value underlying it is still in these bordered systems, and so
it's a great example. I mean,
has to happen, right?
It's a great example. Like, you know, the community's on GitHub, and they're all sharing kind of their repositories together, but they're still paying via Citibank. Right? It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So I'm actually glad you brought up Bitcoin then, because we were probably going to talk about Bitcoin, but. Bitcoin's a really interesting example, but it's also, like, crypto in general is kind of facing this mild crackdown, and I think that there's, like, this big question mark about what's going to happen. You know, the SEC is, like, spread ideas that it might start regulating crypto. It's, like, not totally clear. It's declaring some things, you know, a security. It's not declaring other things a security. What I'm wondering is, what do you guys think about regulation?
Yeah.
And if regulation does kind of happen, like, will it change the adoption of blockchain for companies?
So I'll speak to this. So I've been, for a long time, very outspoken pro-regulation, which most people in crypto are not. And the reason why is because I think it's important to have rules and guidelines that everyone can operate in. And the crypto, you know, market has been kind of a wild, wild west. And there are some, you know, things that I think are analogous to, say, like the dot-com bubble, where in the height of the dot-com bubble, you know, companies could go public with just, you know, writing an idea on a napkin, and a lot of those companies raised globs of money via IPOs, and then they went bust, right? And, investors at a retail level got bilked out of their money, and most of them, or, you know, not all of them, were, you know, kind of scams or nefarious, but it wasn't, wasn't protecting the individual investor, right? And I think the SEC and others will step in and provide more guidelines as to what a good ICO is, and what is a utility, and what is a security. We think that, 99.99% of projects that are considering an ICO just as a fundraising vehicle should, never ICO, that they should go raise, equity and, or debt through the, kind of the traditional means that are well established and protected. That an ICO should be only for the purpose of helping create blockchain infrastructure where the token itself has to have an economic value in order for the protocol to work. And therefore, you need to mint the token, and you need to sell the token, and it needs to be on exchange. Beyond that, I don't think there really is, at this point, much more of a need for ICOs. And so we would love to see fewer ICOs that are of higher quality, where everyone understands the rules of them and understands how, and then everything else can look for solutions that allow them to get the benefits of blockchain technology without first thinking about the cryptocurrency, the currency. And then I think what will come after that is there'll be a whole set of regulations and kind of guidelines for how to actually create security tokens. And so if you want to be a security, you can be a security, but there won't be this kind of fuzzy ground in between of, is it a utility, is it a security, not quite sure. And once you have kind of these swimming lanes and people know where to swim in, then the whole system, I think, will become a lot smoother.
So, so I think actually tomorrow there's an event here at Betaworks that says necessary innovations don't ask for permission. Having said that, though, I think it's very important that we try to work with regulations and within existing regulations, and especially for us as a project, it's an absolute critical requirement that we did, like Blue Star project there. But it has to, it's a two-way dialogue, right? Like, so I was invited to a few workshops by the European Commission to discuss what they should do on blockchain regulations. They're very open and supportive of it, but they don't want to over-regulate it too early on either, because they might stifle actually the innovation that will carry the European Union ahead.
What were their concerns?
Well, on regulation.
With blockchain, since they want to regulate it ostensibly, that's why they met you?
Well, so it was a workshop where they invited sort of key players in the field, well, a set of workshops. So it was really just from their perspective to get input from the field, why they want to regulate, and so far the European Union hasn't strongly put forward any regulations. I think rather why they want to make sure that they don't over-regulate it too early is to make sure that the necessary innovation can happen, right, also within the European Union.
Yeah, I mean, something I'm thinking about is, do you worry that regulation, especially if it came through something like the SEC or also like adoption through central banks, would kind of muck up this like anarchic, decentralized spirit of blockchain and kind of crypto? I mean, here's, give me one moment. Like the thing I'm thinking about is Venezuela has created its own crypto, right? Like, isn't that like totally sort of defiling the spirit of cryptocurrency, that a like, to some extent, dictatorship is creating its own coin?
Well, I don't comment about dictators.
It's fair.
It seems like we're embracing them lately, so, you know. Okay. Go ahead, please.
Doesn't matter who embraces it. We just need traction. I get it.
Well, and I think it depends on the regulation. I mean, I think regulation could be really harmful to it, but positive regulation is really important. You know, we say token economy, but for it to really be an economy, it has to be more than just like a token-based payment system. So, you know, I'm trained as a political economist. I see platforms that create markets. I see, you know, social media that creates communities. And now with crypto, you can create currencies, and smart contracts create governance. So you give me markets, community, currency, and governance. That's an economy, a real economy. And what an economy depends on to grow is trust, institutions, predictability. And so some kind of regulation is important for token economies to flourish, but it has to be the right kind of regulation. We've seen bad regulation and good regulation.
Yeah, I mean, the governments are in a tough space because the U.S. wants to maybe regulate more, but the U.S. only has jurisdiction over the U.S. and these currencies are global, and then the U.S. can't stop all U.S. citizens from buying crypto overseas, and like this stuff's messy, and it's.
I mean, so is trade, and the U.S. is doing a lot there too. So.
We live in Berlin.
Fair enough. No, I
I'm kidding,
point totally.
But it's like this is going to be a space where there's going to be a lot of ambiguity, and I say everyone. My encouragement to colleagues and to folks in the space is I say err on the side of being more cautious than just anarchist, because I don't like jail. It's like you do things that you're not going to get yourself in trouble. And there's a lot of folks out there in crypto who are doing things that are really shady. And I think it will come back to bite you.
All right, I want to open up to the floor if anyone has questions.
Here at Betaworks, we're thinking constantly about community and how communities are what build things and what carry ideas forward and whole movements, really. And so, to me, obviously, there are passionate groups of people that are interested in this early Wild West phase of thinking about how we are carrying blockchain as a concept forward. But how much do you think community and I guess the proselytizers of the idea will play a role in the success of blockchain overall as being a thing that mainstream adopts, and also about a specific technology? So you've got your own individual company. How much do you think that is going to play a role in your success going forward?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the community is everything, and that's whether it's developers who are contributing to the project, developers who are building on the protocol, developers who are being early users. It's developers of other projects who are going first and innovating and writing papers and coming up with theories and ideas, to folks like Adam here, who came down from Syracuse for this event, but he's been one of our biggest fans in the kind of Telegram community, so we're trying to build something that everyone knows the power of it, and no one yet knows exactly where it's going, and it takes a community to figure that out together. I mean, Ben, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this, but.
Well, I mean, I'll just reiterate the same point that I made earlier, is that we really chose Ethereum to build this implementation on first for the developer community, right? Because if you go it alone, you'll always lose, because as a community, you incorporate thoughts faster than anyone. And so you really, also from a developer standpoint, want to capture that sort of maelstrom of thoughts and progress. That's what keeps accelerating this space.
And I think the multiplier is that this really enables so many communities, or actually audiences that we might call communities, to actually become communities, because it's going to facilitate that peer-to-peer exchange in a way that you can't really do it today.
I mean, people kind of laugh and joke that, like, okay, you write a white paper and you do an ICO. It's not that easy. But all these, this notion that people had to publish these white papers is actually super beneficial for everyone building in this space, because you get to read the thoughts and ideas and theories and see if they make sense, and then one builds on the next, And that's something you didn't see in, say, the first, dot-com bubble, where everyone was just building proprietary technology.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a question about the middlemen. So you said, one of the benefits is to get rid of the middlemen. In this process, do you see the role of middlemen changing, and any potential partnership you can have? Because you mentioned $10 spent to grow an investor and customer, while the middlemen already have this clientele.
Yeah. I mean, I think a few ways we'd answer this. One is, first of all, it's going to take a lot of partnerships and players in order to put these pieces together. Just give an example of a problem that we grapple with every day, right? So the OpenST protocol that we build our technology on enables you to create branded tokens, like an Unsplash token, on a side blockchain supported by OST on public Ethereum. Now, that's in itself is a little complex. Now, the person who earns that Unsplash token, they want to pay their rent, let's say in US dollar. And they, or someone else earns Unsplash token, might want to pay their nanny in Indian rupee, or someone else might want to buy something in, Singapore dollar. And how do you enable people to go from something that's on this other blockchain to something that's being supported on public Ethereum, OST, to maybe exchanging that for something like ETH or Bitcoin, to maybe exchanging that for one of these fiat currencies? We can't do all that ourselves. That's going to take a network of partners who can help make that happen. And the good news is that there's a lot of progressive players in the space who have been going out and building those capabilities, and that tends to be, right now, very geographical focused. So, for instance, if it's in Asia, it's, how do you work with Tencent and WeChat so that you can take your Unsplash token and convert it into WeChat currency? Or if it's maybe it's Square Cash, or maybe it's TransferWise, or whatever it might be. There's other players that will need to play a role in this. I asked at the very beginning, who has a Coinbase account. That could be another player in the space who's already figured out a lot of this. Of how do you if you could take your Unsplash token and get dollars or ETH in your Coinbase account, for a lot of people that's solving a lot of getting a lot of way there towards paying their rent. And so we take the approach that we don't need to and we don't want to build this all ourselves, but we want to build in a way where we're solving the customer problem. And so we always think is, what does the customer want to achieve, right? And they achieve, well, I'm a photographer. I want to, make money by building my influence and people liking my photos. And then I earn tokens, but what I really want to do now is to pay for my studio. How do we enable that to happen? Those are the pieces that we have to put together, and we're not going to build all that ourselves.
Who heard of CryptoKitties? Oh, back in the day, most, right?
Back in the day, like 4 months ago.
4 months. Time goes fast.
Remember that one?
So I mean, it's often talked about because as sort of the key example of an application that was very popular. You could trade cats. They were cute on the website, and they went for large amounts of money, right? But when the question of a middleman comes up, right? So we all understand that we can't put full applications on the existing blockchain technology, nor do we want to, but that's a different topic. But if you look at CryptoKitties, what was actually on the blockchain, what was actually traded, was this random hash that the company produced. What was actually considered valuable were the pictures of the cat. But if you read the legal documents assigned, then the copyright to all those pictures remained property of the company, where the actual thing that was traded for hundreds and hundreds of dollars on Ethereum is just this stupid random bit string that no one cares about, right? It was the company that said, oh, this bit string, that's this cute picture. But that cute picture was the ownership of the cat. And so in my opinion, that's what CryptoKitties really got wrong, right? They built a really nice proof of concept and it took off, but they didn't live up to the core concept, right? Because if I'm buying a CryptoKitty, I would at least want to have ownership of that picture of that cat also in legal form. But they kept that ownership. The only thing I had was a stupid string on Ethereum. Just as sort of an introduction to the point, right? Like if we can't put the full application on the blockchain, what do we want to put on the blockchain? And so our hypothesis is there are rich applications, but can we take the value that is being created by users on those digital platforms and actually put that in the hands of users? Can we just take only that value and give that back to the users so that we take that first step of regaining sort of ownership over the actions we take on the internet every day?
I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the infrastructure around building secondary markets. Specifically, I'm interested in the exchanges for ERC20 tokens and how they'll be built, especially if you create tons and tons of tokens and we're swimming in tokens that are difficult to differentiate. How will people be able to trade them? I mean, there's like the tier system. We have Coinbase and like Gemini, and then there's the OX protocol, and then like AirSwap. But I'm wondering, do you guys have a strategy or plan around building infrastructure for this, and what is it?
Yeah. So it's just a couple ways. One is, we don't. First of all, we're not an exchange right now, and we don't think that there should be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of publicly traded tokens. And so what the OpenST protocol does is actually the tradable token is OST. That's staked against creating these branded tokens that are not tradable. So they're only exchangeable for OST. We can go into details on it, but the idea is that Unsplash wouldn't be on an exchange. That its users earn Unsplash token, which has its value based on the value of OST, which is on the exchange. And that enables the users of the token to have an affinity to the branded token, but not to have a proliferation of millions of tokens that are traded on public exchanges, which has all sorts of legal and regulatory kind of challenges as well. So the challenge that we face is how do we create kind of sort of exchange-like product to get out of a branded token and into other currencies, but we don't envision having all of these branded tokens being on listed public exchanges.
I think we're out of time.
Thank you all so much for coming out today, and thank you guys for participating.
Yeah.